Hey guys, what's going on? I hope you're all having a great day today. I know I am because we have another Harman Smith video to respond to here today. And it's a video where Harman Smith claims that dolphin emulation is basically obsolete and should not be used because of Nintendo Classics. Which, for those of you who don't know, it's a service that you get if you subscribe to the Nintendo Switch Online and expansion pack that allows you to play select old games such as GameCube games or Game Boy games, and it has a total of about 10 GameCube games available at the moment. Harman literally thinks that this is basically making Dolphin Emulator obsolete. He thinks the ability to play 10 GameCube games on the Switch is replacing the emulator that allows you to play 2,250 games on both the GameCube and the Wii. Anyway, I don't want to keep you guys here too long for the intro. Let's just go ahead and hear out what Harman has to say.
One of the things we have been talking about on the Smith channel,
I understand not cropping out every single little mistake you make when you speak in a YouTube video, but if you fuck up in the first like 5 seconds or so, you should just do a whole new take. But let's be real, if you take a look at Harman Smith's YouTube channel, his motto is obviously quantity over quality. Just pump out as many videos as possible and hope one of them hits the magic algorithm pull.
Is the decline of PC emulation.
It's funny that you spend so many videos talking about the quote-unquote decline of PC emulation, but not once have you ever made a compelling argument.
Nobody's emulating games.
Nobody's emulating games? Yeah, sure, buddy. What a cope. So I find it very funny that he claims that nobody is emulating games when he spends half of this video shilling emulation.
Nobody's emulating games.
Wrong, moron!
Those who try are getting cracked down on. Guys are going to prison.
People are not going to jail for just emulating, and if that were the case, then everyone who bought the Switch 2, or even the Switch 1, and used the Nintendo Switch Online service to play old games would be arrested.
Guys are getting fined. Nintendo has a literal slave working for them now because he got caught modding Nintendo hardware.
The guy he's talking about, Gary Bowser, was trying to make money off of mods and hacks, and that's why he got arrested. People who just emulate or even pirate probably are not going to get in any trouble. Well, people who emulate are for sure not going to get in trouble, but people who pirate probably aren't either.
And there is many examples of this happening, many reasons as to why. And more and more, we're starting to see more and more people realize that Nintendo Classics, which is, of course, the service on Nintendo Switch Online that gives you access to all these old classic Nintendo games, is indeed a superior service than Dolphin.
No, it is a inferior service because it can play 10 GameCube games, whereas the PC emulator Dolphin can play a total of 2,250 games, and it can play Wii games, which NSO cannot.
We saw this recently with Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, and in fact, this is the big thing that I think has really kicked off the trend in the emulation circles, because they're starting to panic, because they're starting to realize that there aren't enough people coming into the emulation community to keep it viable.
There aren't enough people coming into the emulation community to keep it viable. Bro, most of the emulators out there are already done. Don't require any more updates to play the majority of games. Like, I'm pretty sure 100% of Dolphin games are already playable. And the emulators are free anyway, so they aren't really relying on new people coming in and using the emulators to, keep updating it. The statement you made is so stupid, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what exactly you mean by it.
There aren't enough people to make it worthwhile, to make it profitable.
Buddy, Dolphin is literally free to use.
Anybody who's interested in Fire Emblem Path of Radiance will just go ahead and get NSO.
I mean, I'm sure some people will subscribe to Nintendo Online to play it, but I'm pretty sure most people who own a device powerful enough to play the game on an emulator are just gonna emulate it. Because in order to play it the official way on NSO, you have to pay $50 a year, because you need the Switch Online and the expansion pack with it.
They'll play it through the Nintendo Classic service. And this has been something I've been predicting for a long time. I've long said that Nintendo Classics is a far more viable method of playing old Nintendo games in emulation, but over the past decade, we have seen a lot of people bending over backwards, trying to do everything they possibly can to keep up the narrative that this is somehow some bad service.
The service doesn't have enough games to really justify the extra money a month on top of what you already pay for online. And the service is lacking a lot of big flagship Nintendo titles from the eras of the consoles it has. Like, for example, the GameCube doesn't have Mario Sunshine, it doesn't have Smash Bros. Melee, it doesn't have Mario Kart Double Dash, it doesn't have the Mario Party games. There are a lot of games that it kind of needs for it to be considered a good service.
And with the release of Path of Radiance in particular, it seems we've reached the tipping point where people have realized that there is no value to Dolphin. There is no reason to go out and pirate Nintendo games and get a hold of them illegally. You know, you can just get a Switch 2 and pay a subscription service and get it that way. And
yeah, guys, why boot up Dolphin Emulator and get to play your GameCube game for free when you can go out and buy a $450 console and then add $50 a year of online for each year that you want to play the game? Do you really need to ask this question, man?
that's led to the kind of this last ditch cope from the community where they're trying to make a controversy around the service, specifically the idea that like you don't literally own the games, you're just like paying for a subscription for service. Like, you don't see any of these people complaining about Netflix or like Amazon Prime Video or like any of these other like streaming services that exist. Like, oh no, when Nintendo has their streaming service where you can play old games by paying like a 1 yearly fee, you know, that's somehow some huge epic disaster.
I mean, I guess you have a point when it comes to people crying about not owning video games and then having no problem with things like Netflix or even Steam in a lot of cases. I know there's a lot of people that bitch about not owning games and then use Steam. However, wouldn't it be nice if Nintendo allowed you to buy and own these games for like, let's say $5 for a GameCube game and you just had it on your Switch 2 to play and you didn't have to pay any yearly service? Wouldn't that be awesome? Hell, they could even sell GameCube games for $10 or $15, and I would personally be fine with it. And think about how awesome it would be to play the old Pokemon games on your Switch 2. You pay like 10 or $5 and you get to play Pokemon Yellow. That would be fucking amazing. Why are you so against the idea of people asking for more options to actually buy and own your games instead of the only option being a subscription service?
And it comes off like a giant cope, you know, especially when these people have no intention of buying the games to begin with.
Whether or not people actually have any intention of buying these games is irrelevant. It would be a nice option to have. Whether or not that person, you know, advocating for that option is going to buy it or not doesn't really mean anything.
Right? Like, all this is an attempt at trying to steer people away from Nintendo Classics and steer them back onto the emulation plantation. You know, back to like booting up Project 64 and having the developers of that like bombard you with ads to donate to them, right?
This is just straight up disingenuous right here. When you boot up Project 64, they give you a 30-second timer that you have to wait, in which you can support the devs to get rid of the 30-second timer. That timer only pops up when you first open Project 64 and get ready to boot a game. Whatever Nintendo 64 game you are playing does not get interrupted for the developers of the emulator to bombard you with ads. And if you're even somewhat smart with computers, it is so easy to get rid of this timer. Harman is trying to paint it here like the devs are stopping your gameplay to bombard you with ads, when it's only when you first boot up the program and they ask you once. And by the way, that's only one Nintendo 64 emulator, there are others out there.
You know, like, they have to keep you locked in to the emulation situation instead of actually, playing the games legally.
I've already said this before, but you can legally emulate Nintendo games by redumping them. Now, if we're all gonna be honest with ourselves, are most people doing that? No. But in most cases, these games are old as fuck anyway, so who actually cares if someone's going to pirate like a 30-year-old game? If you were to actually go out and legally buy Fire Emblem Path of Radiance for the GameCube, the devs are not getting your money anyway. The only person who is profiting is the guy reselling the game. So if you pirate it, nobody's actually being hurt.
But what's happening is that more and more people are realizing that Nintendo Classics is the better experience.
Are you seriously trying to argue it would be a better experience to go out, spend $450 on a console, and then $50 a year for the online and expansion pack to play a GameCube game, rather than just emulate it on your PC, have the option to use whatever controller you want, have the option to use mods, play in whatever resolution you want? Are we serious right now? Come on, man. And what if you want to play a GameCube game that's not one of the 11 games that Nintendo has picked out for their online subscription service? Are you just gonna sit there and wait possibly years for it to come out? Are we seriously going to act like that's the better option? Come the fuck on.
Instead of having a bunch of different emulators that deal with a bunch of different Nintendo consoles, you have one easy to understand system with all these different games on it. People, one of the big major copes was this idea that, like, well, they don't have a wide enough selection. Ass face.
This is some elite level bootlicking right here. What's that? You want to play games that aren't the ones Nintendo picked out for their online subscription service? You fucking ass face. Just be grateful, dude.
Nintendo Classics is one of the best features on Nintendo Switch. It's been this very embarrassing cope from the community for the past several years, trying to steer you away from it, trying to tell you that Steam Deck is somehow better when you can't get a hold of Nintendo games on there legally.
First of all, it is possible to get a hold of Nintendo games on there legally. Second of all, let's not pretend like it's hard or out of the ordinary for someone to just go up to a ROM website and download some GameCube game to put on their Steam Deck.
More and more people have no reason to boot up an emulator.
People have no reason to boot up an emulator? Bro, what if people want to play old games that are not available on the Nintendo Switch online service, or simply don't want to pay $50 a year to play old-ass games? What if somebody wants to play, let's say, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door with a texture mod on? There are more reasons than ever to boot up an emulator, especially with the quality of a lot of modern releases in the gaming industry.
Back in the day, people only got into emulation to try and play obscure Japanese-only Super Nintendo games.
Yeah, and this is 2026. This ain't fucking back in the day, bro. Times change.
And now, when you have all of these options on Nintendo Classics, why would you not go for that?
Because there are tons of options that people don't have access to.
It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Those words sum up your video perfectly.
Especially when you account for the fact that the eShop does exist, and plenty of these games do get re-released on the eShop and are available through that method. You have, Metroid Prime Remastered.
Okay, cool. What if someone wants to play Metroid Prime non-remastered? What if someone wants to play Metroid Prime 2 and 3?
On the eShop, even though that's not on Nintendo Classics yet, you have, Pikmin 1 and 2. You have, all sorts of stuff, right? Basically, there's no shortage of games to play on Nintendo consoles that you can only find on Nintendo consoles. And the entire narrative that, emulation is, some huge, scene that, makes playing everything on PC is perfectly possible it's not true. It never was true. It never has been true. Never will be true.
Almost every single game to ever exist, even obscure console releases, are all playable on PC. The only games that I know of that aren't playable on PC at the moment are Switch 2 games, and a Switch 2 emulator is in development, but keep dreaming, man.
But like, you know, as more and more legislation stops like piracy and modding hardware and like transferring things over and stuff like that, as that becomes more and more like, as that happens more and more often, like the entire PC ecosystem is going to collapse. It's going to fall apart, and you're already seeing a lot of PC gamers seething about it, and it's only going to get worse from here.
The entire PC ecosystem will collapse because some Nintendo games might be a little bit harder to emulate in the future due to crackdowns by Nintendo. Yeah, sure, man, it's not like platforms like Steam get record monthly users, and the PC has an ecosystem outside of emulation. So even if emulation were to collapse, it won't, by the way, PC would be completely fine. But yeah, that brings us to the end of Harman's video here. If you guys did enjoy this response video, a like would be greatly appreciated, a sub would be greatly appreciated. If you didn't like this video, you can leave a dislike and an angry comment, but that is pretty much everything I have to say. See you guys.